What is one secret your parents can never know? When I was in elementary school, I was at Target with my mom and sister. At the checkout counter, I saw these cinnamon-flavored Tic Tacs, and I had to have them because I hadn't fully developed the whole want-need function in my brain. I knew my mom wouldn't buy them for me, so I grabbed them, sneakily, and put them in my pocket, sneakily. I felt pretty guilty the whole way home, and didn't make eye contact with anyone in case they could read my mind. As soon as I was inside the safety of my home, I made my way upstairs, sneakily, and opened my hot goods. They were awful. Easily my least favorite Tic Tac. I ended up throwing them in the garbage can outside, sneakily, to avoid any suspicion. This is my shame, and I carry it alone. Except now with theoretically thousands of people. TLDR, the only time I ever stole anything, the fruits of my victory turned rotten in my mouth. One time I dropped an entire roll of toilet paper into the bowl when trying to change it. I didn't want them to know I ruined an entire roll, so I hid it in my closet, and over a course of a few weeks I would rip away pieces and throw them away. Edit, since some people seem to be assuming my parents were horrible and I was frightened, that's definitely not the case. I was just a dumb kid that was embarrassed about dropping a whole roll in the toilet. Santa is real. Nobody tell them, please. It would break their hearts, and someday they'll figure it out on their own anyway. Edit, this was gilded. I have no idea what the appropriate response is, so I'll just say thanks and Google the appropriate action. Thank you. Edit. I know. My parents told me when I was about 10 that, honey, Santa isn't real. I thought, wow, how can you live in such denial? My sister and I were reading through my mom's old high school yearbook, and we kept seeing everyone's signs saying something along the lines of, congrats, you and X are perfect together. X is not our dad, and we had never heard X's name mentioned before. After a little more digging we found out she had married X right out of high school, divorced, then married our father. Neither of us really cared, but it was still a huge shock she hasn't told us now that we're both in our mid-20s. Edit, I subconsciously used X as the name, not even realizing it came from the most popular story on Reddit at the moment. When I was younger, I read in my mom's journal that she had an abortion before she was pregnant with me. She doesn't know that I know, and I'm not sure how she would react. I'm just glad they decided to keep the second pregnancy. My dad thinks I lost my virginity earlier than I actually did. He thought he'd walked in on me post-sex with my GF at the time, but we'd actually just been play fighting, and the moment he walked in was the moment she decided to put the strap for her top back on her shoulder. After that I find out my dad's told half of my family about this, and despite me trying to tell him I hadn't done anything, he claimed to have believed me, but didn't. So he'll never know when I actually did, because he believes a lie. Edit, I was 17/18 when the play fight happened. I lost my virgin some years later in my early 20s. When we were staying at a friend's place on holiday, my SO and I accidentally broke her guest bed. Like, one of the legs gave way and the whole thing collapsed. It was an ultra-cheap metal frame, and SO found a meat cleaver, and we banged the bejesus out of that bed to get it back into shape, to no avail. I had to ring my friend and confess. Due to the conservative nature of my parents and their firm beliefs, we have allowed them to believe that we are chaste and good and would never actually have sex, you gross. We haven't lied, but we have certainly been guilty of omission. We are getting married this year, and my friend with the broken bed is a bridesmaid, and is working on her speech. How will we fix the bed frame? Well, I'm pretty sure beds are made of meat obviously, but we have no cleaver. Dang. Wait, I think I saw one earlier in the drawer with the wrenches and tools are saved. Get the cleaver, you horny bastard. When I was 8, me and my sister cracked my dad's chessboard. We hid the pieces in someone else's trash can. My dad has had it since he was 11, he was 46 at the time, and he was fuming mad. He thought he lost it, and he still does. Looking back, do you think he could have repaired the chessboard? I would feel so guilty if I realized later that I not only broke it, but removed any possible chance of closure. So, when I was 6 or 7 we had Christmas with the extended family. One of my uncles was there, and I was always a bit afraid of him because he had done some time for a drug charge and just gotten out within the last year or 2. Anyway, I walk into the kitchen at one point, and he is there with this giant wedge of cheese. He looks up and asks if I wanted any. I nod, because I fucking love cheese. He says, okay, but you cannot tell your parents because you'll ruin your dinner, they will get mad at me, and he slices me a few pieces. We eat in silence and then I leave, convinced that I was an accomplice in some terrible act with my ex-con uncle. To this day, I have never told my parents. As to what would happen if they found out, well, then they would know that the reason I didn't eat that one Christmas dinner in the early 90s was because I had already filled up on expensive cheese. Replaced bourbon from a priceless bottle of liquor with Evan Williams when I was 15. I found out later my parents were saving the bottle for their 50th anniversary. It was given to them by my great-grandpa at their wedding. Still have 23 years to break the news. You have the internet and 23 years to find a replacement. Put together a bang-ass collection of rare bourbon and an eloquent apology speech. I signed a lease for an apartment in Florida before I came back home from my internship down at Disney. I came back home and never went back down. I paid for it for a year. My roommates wouldn't let me have someone sublease. It was a horrible situation and I fucked up. I don't need to hear it from my parents on how stupid and young I was. Ori. I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations are up on this one, so why not? I was a junior in high school and had some friends into LAN parties who were seniors. But I couldn't really join them because my family was pretty poor and neither them or I could afford a computer for me to use at that time. So one day my older friends gave me one of their older PCs, Pentium 3, with a couple parts missing, RAM, HDD, that I could build out for myself. Now about 15 years later, it's turned out to be a great jumping off point because now I'm a successful system administrator and love working in the IT field. And I owe it in many ways to that first computer I learned to build back up from scratch and make my own. Only they didn't give me that computer. We stole it from the high school. Sorry, not sorry. I'm not that close to my parents, but as an adult I'm a lot mellower and recognize the fact that they're nice people who did their best. So, there's nothing that would be catastrophic for me if they found it out, but I'd be a little glum about the unnecessary trauma it had put them through if they ever found out how many people I've slept with, how many of them were dudes, or the sheer quantity of drugs I did at one point. My freshman year of college my parents got notified that I had been essentially issued a slap on the wrist for drinking. They don't know that it was because I had just woke up from a sorority house flower bed, I think, and was walking the opposite way from my dorm at 3 a.m. in jorts, boots and a mullet wig with a Texas flag cape. My mom knows I smoke weed occasionally, that's fine, hell I've smoked with her. She can never know that I smoke in my room, she'll get paranoid about it being a fire hazard. I might legitimately get kicked out of the house. This will come too late to ever be seen. That I was homeless for more than 2 years. During the recession from 2008 to sometime in 2010, I lost my job and eventually was kicked out of my apartment. I had a 10-year-old car that was paid off, so I lived out of that until I found a series of jobs cleaning houses, working in a recreational center part-time. Parents lived 1,000 miles away and I managed to keep a mailing address at a friend so they never realized. It would have killed them that I didn't want to ask for help, I wanted to do it on my own. When I told them that I was sleeping over at my friend's house for 3 days and that we had a lot of activities planned out in celebration of our successes in our exams, I actually went to Barcelona, then France, then Italy. Funny to think how your action probably influenced the life of these drug dealers there. Well, they might have gotten caught eventually anyway, but imagine if they ever found out this is why they got busted. This is really weird. I had a friend that basically started a grass fire in a similar way that got out of control. He called the fire department claiming he had just found it and never got in trouble. It was in a field next to a house that was later busted for meth a few years later. Good on you for being that filter. I shudder to think about people going through my shit after I die and finding all my skeletons. Is there an official term for this? Should this be a thing? I need to designate someone to do this, otherwise I'll ruin a lot of memories of me. Edit, a lot of people have suggested porn buddy. I'd get punched in the face if I went to my best friend and said, Larry, we've known each other a long damn time. Let's be porn buddies. Surely we can come up with a better term that requires little or no explanation. My mother-in-law is the same way. She keeps getting viruses and asking us to fix it, even though we live 19 hours away, or buy her a new one. She recently started seeing a guy who's a gamer and has suddenly decided she wants us to buy her a gaming PC, even though the most advanced game she plays is Candy Crush. 1. Get her an antivirus program like Average or Avast. Make it very clear that she should never touch it. 2. Get Firefox or Chrome, disguise it as IE if you must. 3. Get adblock, be sure to whitelist some sites like Reddit. 3. Get TeamViewer. 4. Get a $40 fancy looking case and just move all of her current computer parts into it. I'm the resident PC gamer in the house, so I know how you feel. Knowing a bit about computers automatically makes me the go-to tech support guy for the entire family. That said, I have managed to lay down a ground rule that I will not do much on Apple products. Everything is too locked down to actually fix whatever's wrong with it. I'm in the incredibly fortunate position of being the most tech literate in my family. However, my father first started getting into computers in the 80s and has always held his own, meaning that he holds the esteemed position of being the computer guy. Nobody ever asks me for help in my family, except him, and he does it in the best way. I can't get X to work, I've done this, that and this and run X, Y and Z diagnostics, so I've ruled out this, this and this. Any ideas? This is the most innocent response in the thread, and it reminds me of something I did. Once when I was 7 or so, I was playing before bed and I somehow frayed the cord of my bedside lamp, so when my mom came in, I told her and she said, okay, we'll fix it, replace the cord in the morning, just leave it unplugged. I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and forgot that my lamp was broken, so I plugged it back in to be able to see where I was going, and a couple of sparks popped out of the frayed section. Terrified, I quickly unplugged it and ran to the bathroom to get a cup of water and then poured it onto the section of the carpet where the sparks landed, and disappeared. I must have sat there for a half-hour worried that I was going to start a fire, and I wanted to be sure nothing happened. I remember sleeping terribly that night, anxious that our house was going to burn down, and going over the evacuation plan we learned how to make in school. There's no way I could be like the Forest Fire meth lab kid. You can't put your awkwardness with women all on your parents. At some point you have to take charge of your romantic life and avoid thinking that you have to seek the approval of anyone outside of your friendship with the girl. Edit, gold? Well, that's a great way to start off my new year. Dude, I can relate so much to this. I think parents do this because they're awkward and don't know how to have a regular conversation about relationships with their kid, so they sacrifice their kid's humility for theirs. It's subconsciously selfish. My parents are bad for this still, and I'm in my mid-20s. When I was younger, my parents would pick me up from school and ask every girl they passed if she was my GF or wanted to be. If I even mentioned talking to a female, they're convinced it must be a new GF and they want to meet her. The last time I brought a GF to their house for dinner, my father waited until about halfway through the meal to ask her if she spits or swallows. Without skipping a beat, she replied swallow and then started laughing, thank fuck. Another time my mother cried and lost her shit because I didn't want to invite my fuck buddy to lunch with her. My sister found out about her and told them. I have never brought another woman to my parents' house since. I just can't chance what the fuck my parents will say. I know they love me very much, I just wish they didn't take such pleasure in making me feel awkward. I don't think parents realize how big of an effect this has on kids. Why you're supposed to be embarrassing, but when it gets to the point where every time your son mentions a girl and you make fun of him, he's going to stop bringing up that topic. Okay, everybody is commenting he knew. What I'm more impressed by is that in 27 years, no one ever accidentally tapped the paper with their foot, or it never got wet or anything. That's absurd. How can it still be in place looking like new? TBH, the kind of people who use their children like that aren't usually the type to be devastated about it later. Sorry. Internet hugs though? You seem to have learned from their mistake, and good on you. I had a friend in elementary school who was always weird when it came time to go home. Years later I found out he didn't want to go home because his parents would force their problems on him even though he was 10. Like, not only their divorce, but also they'd yell at him for money problems. Basically, he was their verbal punching bag. Felt bad for him ever since I found out. If this is still ongoing, I don't know why you would hide it from them. Let them know that it continues to upset you and that you've made it a goal never to be like them. Furthermore, for the sake of your daughter not having to go through her grandparents doing this to her, you should probably draw a line in the sand somewhere. In my case, I've gotten 6 additional piercings besides the 2 lobes I've had since I was little. My mom has no idea because I carefully hide them and they're pretty subtle to begin with anyway. When I was younger, she saw me wearing an ear cuff, and she thought it was a real piercing, so she tried to rip it out. So, generally, I would really like it if she never found out because I like having my ears intact. My mom still calls my boyfriend, friend of an NBSB, how is your friend doing? Mom, you know he is not my friend, right? So, how is he doing? And NBSB, my mom, while not homophobic, still doesn't face it completely, but she accepts me and has been supportive. Coming out to her was most likely the most difficult thing I had to do. The thing I find weird about homophobes that their whole idea is that homosexual sexual acts are repulsive. Homophobes are literally the only people who actively think of gay people having sex when you mention them. I think that is ironic. My dad was pretty cool when I came out to him a couple of years ago, but the thought of his son hooking up with another guy apparently caused him some distress. He brought it up to their priest one time, they're Episcopalian, thank God. And the priest basically said, does it feel any less weird to think of your daughter and her husband having sex? Story like this a little bit on the radio last year. Kid just got a BB gun and shot out the glass patio door. Tried to blame it on their pets. He later confessed on air to his parents and they knew THR whole time. Come mommy, and daddy, you'd better come too, be still and be silent. It's time that you knew. You've asked for the answer, you're wondering how, and maybe, just maybe, you're old enough now. You think you've matured and you've lost the pretense, 'cause when you grow up you need stuff that makes sense, and when all our fantasies fade with our youth, we swallow that fact, and we call it the truth, but don't worry mommy, 'cause I understand, you've no time for magic with bills in your hand. So think for a moment. You know what you feel, just open your mind, and you'll find that is real. Or I did this. My whole family was out of town except me and the vet. We were boarding our cat at called and said that our cat wasn't doing well. I'd spoken to the vet about putting her down before, but she was my dad's best friend and he was having a very difficult time coming to terms with her mortality. I tried to call my family but they didn't answer, so drove the few hours up to their vet and held the kitty as she slipped away. She looked horrible when I got there, like she was moments from death whether or not we put her down. It was heart-wrenching and traumatic and it took my family a long time to forgive me. I'm still not sure if my dad has yet. I'm sure he would have wanted a goodbye, but the cat was in pain and I'm glad that I could spare my family from having to see her like that. I still don't know if it was the right choice, after all these years. Screw them man, you did the right thing. I had a cat when I was in high school that was older than me and was in failing health. I would come home every day and search the house for him to see if he was alive or not. It was horrible, dreaded coming home. Made me sick, stressed out, everything. After looking and finding him, there was a few times I thought he was dead. I wouldn't know whether to be happy he was alive or cry that he was barely hanging on to life by a thread. This went on for months. But they didn't care and refused to put him down even though his face was swollen and couldn't eat. If I could have afforded it I wouldn't have hesitated to put him down just so he wouldn't have had to suffer for so long. So good on you man. You did the right thing. That was my big secret for a while. It was so much better after I told my parents, though. They were really upset, of course, but it turned out that my dad understood a lot more than I thought as he has had his own suicidal thoughts. I've got a much better relationship with my parents now and it feels much more real. My parents told the extended family when I was in the hospital, and I'm still upset that they did that without talking to me, but my extended family was all much more sympathetic and encouraging than I would have thought. It's also a relief not to feel like I have a huge secret anymore. I will say, though, that I won't ever tell them the details of what I did to myself. They just don't need to know that. Not all parents will be so understanding, of course, and even with mine there were some really tough times, but the fact that you say what upset them would be that you didn't come to them first suggests to me that they would be really supportive. Again, though, I'm saying all this but still haven't told my parents I'm gay, so I'm really not one to talk here. My mom is actually pretty open about it and told us that she has had 2 abortions. At that time we were doing really shit in terms of money and my mom thought that she couldn't raise them properly with her already having 4 kids, so she decided to have the abortion. She sometimes still regret her decision and wonder what her 2 other kids would have been now. Kinda weird hearing it from her though and knowing that you could have 2 other siblings. So many parents in this thread that are really interested in their kids' virginity. Am I the only one that thinks it's creepy to want that info? I mean, if you want to make sure your kid is being safe and responsible, sure, but knowing the exact date and time they popped their cherry? My mother-in-law didn't believe that my then boyfriend and I weren't having sex in high school either. It was pretty funny actually. Husband, we were just hanging out. MIL, okay, but did you use protection? Husband, well no. Because we didn't have sex. I went to Catholic school all my life, but I told my mom I didn't believe in God when I was 12. 10/10 would do again because I genuinely didn't believe in religion after a lot of thinking, and I got to sleep in on Sundays from then on. I'm confused by this. Mostly because, 1. Why do they think they know when you lost your virginity? Did you have a popped my cherry party or something? Did you make a big announcement at 18, I'm not a virgin? I just don't get how that information was leaked in the first place. 2. If you did spill the beans for some reason, why did you throw out the wrong date in the first place? 3. How would you have an opportunity to correct such a miscommunication? 4. Why does this matter? I had a laptop that I received as a gift from my uncle, and it was already 5 years old when I got it, and it had no working battery. The laptops at school had identical batteries. Needless to say, one of the school laptops lost a battery that day. When I told my mom I had been put in a holding cell, not overnight, just until someone came to pick me up after I'd been busted with pot, she said it was a shame I didn't spend the night in jail. She said it would have taught me a lesson. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.